County. The Clippers beat Miami 109-98. Fans entering the Intuit Dome in Inglewood were given towels with the words LA Strong. Keep your radar up on this situation. Colorado football coach Deion Sanders confirmed that he had a conversation Monday with Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones. Jones is looking for a new coach. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 stands with you, neighbor to neighbor, bringing you resources and what you need to know. Sign up for Notify LA on your phone to get fire danger alerts and updates, or check on lafd.org. The Watch Duty app is free and provides wildfire maps and updates in real time. Keep your gas tank full and plan your route in case you have to leave the area. City and county officials are urging you to pack a go bag so you can be ready to leave your home quickly in case of an evacuation order. Your go bag should include a couple of days of clothing, copies of your important documents and ID, money, insurance information, your medications, electronic devices, batteries, chargers, a small radio, and emergency contacts. If you receive an evacuation order, gather your loved ones, grab your bag, your pet food, and leave immediately. For information on shelters for your pets or even your family, call 211 for the City of Los Angeles and 311 countywide. Wearing a mask outside will help protect you from smoke, toxic fume, and particulate matter. If you don't need to go out, it's best to stay home with the windows closed. Getting to know your neighbors is a great way to stay safe, stay connected, and share resources. And Angelinos are stepping up to help, so reach out and find the assistance you need. Mutual Aid LA Network is constantly updating a Google Sheet with mutual aid resources. You can find it at tiny.cc-malan-fire. The earlier you make a plan, the better off you'll be when every second counts. Praying for LA, preparing, and standing with you. KBLA Talk 1580.
One of the greatest songwriters of all time, and not a bad performer either. Smokey Robinson joins us today in our third hour in studio. Look forward to seeing Smokey and having a great conversation in hour three as we celebrate an amazing career and specifically the 50th anniversary of his seminal album, A Quiet Storm. He has announced the Las Vegas residency kicking off in April. So Smokey, in his 80s now, looking good and busier than ever. We'll talk to Smokey for the hour in our final hour today. But in this hour, as promised, a conversation with the esteemed legal scholar and Professor Michelle Adams about her new text, The Containment, Detroit, the Supreme Court, and the Battle for Racial Justice in the North. Let me set this conversation up, and then I'll let Professor Adams loose in this hour, and it's going to be a good one. So just over 50 years ago, a lower federal court in Detroit brought America to the brink of a fully integrated public school system. Imagine that, a fully integrated public school system. That court, building on the victory of Brown v. Board, decided a case that would have required metropolitan desegregation even in the North. Had that ruling survived, it would have brought the nation's school children, black and white, together, whether they lived in urban or suburban areas. But that never came to be. It never happened. In a now mostly forgotten case called Milliken v. Bradley, the Supreme Court turned its back on Brown. In 1974, the court struck down the lower court's ruling, and with it, the sweeping revolutionary integration plan created by the lower court judge. racial integration in our country's schools never happened, the effects of which we are still facing as a nation even today. But how did this case come about in the first place, and what can we learn from it today? How's that for a setup, Professor Adams?
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm honored to have you on. Thank you for your time. Just wanted to make sure that you and I and the audience are on the same page in terms of the backstory of the book, The Containment, and why I wanted to have you on. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. With that setup, let me just ask you, this is rare for me, but with the setup I just offered, where do you want to begin in this story for the next hour?
Let's talk about how the case got started. Let me walk you through that, and then we can sort of talk about what some of the outcomes were. But let me also just begin by saying that I really did try to write this book not from the perspective of being a constitutional law professor, which of course I am, but I also really wanted to try to reach a general audience. And so what I've done in this book is to have a character-driven story that really is open to everyone who wants to understand what happened. That's really important to me, to be able to sort of use my skill of translation to be able to talk about this incredibly important case that, as you mentioned, has been largely forgotten.
And before you jump, who are some of those characters? Give me some of the characters for starters.
You've got the judge who starts out being very conservative and sort of hates the NAACP, or at least their legal campaign, and then ends up becoming one of the strongest supporters of desegregation, a white judge, an immigrant, in the United States. You've got Detroit's leading black nationalist, Albert Clegg, who really sets the whole thing in motion. You've got Remus Robinson, who's the first black member of the Detroit Public School Board, and who sort of he's in tension with Clegg in a lot of ways, and that sort of recalls some of the big tensions, the political tensions in black political thought in the 1960s, 1970s between black nationalism and integrationism. You've got the head of the Detroit School Board, who's a white guy who's incredibly interested in integration and makes some changes and makes some moves that make other white folks angry. You've got the Johnny Appleseed of organizing, who goes around from city to city in the North and the West, June Shagaloff, to organize black folks who are protesting. And this is another big piece of the history that's been forgotten, is that black parents in the North in the 1960s, across Boston and Chicago and Los Angeles and Seattle, were protesting and trying to get rid of segregated schools. And she's a community organizer that's helping them do that. So that's a big piece of it too, and many, many more.
So those are some of the characters in this story. The book is called The Containment: Detroit, the Supreme Court, and the Battle for Racial Justice in the North. The author of that text we are grateful to have as our guest in this hour, Professor Michelle Adams. We'll get it started for real when we come forward on Tavis Smiley. Speaking of Detroit, there's Smokey Robinson joining us today in our third hour.
Everybody's listening to Tavis. More when we come forward.
This statement has not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
I was always tired, with weekly bouts of indigestion. A friend asked me, when was the last time you did a detox? Never, I said. So she recommended Active Liver.
Our liver works hard every day to remove toxins from processed foods and unclean air and water. But too many toxins can overwhelm the liver, causing it to actually store toxins in our body fat. Low energy, brain fog, headaches, bloating, and skin irritation are all telltale signs that we need to act. Water or juice fasts can help, but often require days or weeks of feeling tired and sick. Thankfully, there's an easier way. Active Liver from New Nordic is a natural supplement that helps your liver effectively eliminate toxins on a daily basis, leaving you feeling better with more energy and less bloating.
Within a week of taking Active Liver, I was feeling better, and now I have more energy than I've had in years.
Available in both tablet or delicious gummies, you can find Active Liver online at Amazon or NewNordicUSA.com, or in stores at your local CVS or Meijer grocery.
The Ignited Light program invites one and all to the 8th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service, January 18th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza. The spirit of Dr. King's legacy of service continues as local organizations come together. a drive-through food giveaway, free medical services, the Department of Children's Services offering employment opportunities. Foster and emancipated females aged 18 to 26 can take part in a very special She Ready luggage giveaway on Saturday, January 18th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., Baldwin Hills, Crenshaw Plaza. More info, visit adayon.org. Again, adayon.org. Drivers, please enter from the Marlton Ave entrance.
Make a move into a home of your own. With City National Bank's Ladder Up Home Loan Grant, you could receive up to $20,000 that you never need to pay back. Use it toward your down payment, save on closing costs, or to buy down your mortgage rate. Find out more at cnb.com/ladderuphome. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Property must be in a qualifying market in California, New York, or New Jersey. Additional terms and conditions apply. Not all applicants will qualify. Terms are subject to change without notice. City National Bank is an equal housing lender. Member FDIC. NMLS number 536994.
As a mom, comforting my family is what I do best. Vicks Vapor Stick provides soothing, non-medicated Vicks vapors in an easy-to-apply stick. And it dries fast, so there's no mess. I use it to comfort myself and my family.
Thanks, Mom.
Vicks Vapo Stick. Soothing comfort for the whole family. And when you need more comfort for yourself, try Vicks Vapo Shower Max for steamy Vicks Vapors. Use as directed. Vapo Stick for use ages 4 and up. Vapo Shower Max use for adults only.
Hey, can you blow up some balloons for Jack's party?
I can't. I'm so congested.
You need Sinex Saline from Vicks.
Sinex Saline Nasal Spray?
Yeah, just Sinex. Breathe.
Sinex Saline instantly clears everyday congestion associated with colds and year-round allergies with a gentle, ultra-fine mist that's no mess and easy to control.
Daddy, we need more balloons.
On it.
Enjoy life's important moments without congestion. Try Sinex Saline from Vicks. Just Sinex. Breathe. Use as directed.
He's a paradigm pioneer and the top-rated African-American talk show host in the nation, according to Talkers Magazine. You're tapped in with Tavis Smiley right now.
People say I'm the life of the party 'cause I tell a joke or two. Although I might be the laughing loud and hearty, deep inside I'm blue. So take a good look at my face. You'll see my smile looks sort of place. If you look closer, it's easy to trace the tracks of my tears.
William Smokey Robinson is all that and then some. The Miracles, amazing solo career, all the hits he wrote for other artists on the Motown label. It's been an amazing career. We're going to have a career conversation with Smokey Robinson today in our third and final hour. Speaking of Detroit, though, I'm delighted to have on this program right now Professor Michelle Adams. Her book is called The Containment: Detroit, the Supreme Court, and the Battle for Racial Justice in the North. We're having a conversation about the fight then and now to ensure equality of opportunity for black children. And this book, I think it's fair to say, fundamentally challenges how we understand the history of civil rights and how the Supreme Court essentially undermined the promise of Brown v. Board. With that said, I asked this question, and I'll cut Professor Adams loose. How did this case come about in the first place, Professor Adams?
Thank you. So we go back to 1970. In the last segment, we talked about how there were black parents who were demonstrating and trying to get their schools to be more desegregated in the North, which is something that we don't think too much about, but that was happening widely across the North and the West. And this guy named Albert Clegg sort of goes to a regular Detroit Board of Education meeting and says, you're miseducating black students. The schools are separate and unequal. And he sort of slams this report down, and now you suddenly have this liberal school board that's taken over, and they actually care about it, and they want to do something about it. And so ultimately, this school board decides to implement a limited integration plan. And that's when all hell breaks loose. And essentially what happens is that the state of Michigan passes a law that overturns the city of Detroit's limited integration plan. And that's when the NAACP gets involved because they sort of say, this feels a little Southern. You know, you're not supposed to pass a state statute that overturns segregation. That sounds like the kind of thing they do in Mississippi, not the kind of thing they do. They're not supposed to be doing that in Michigan. And so the NAACP gets involved, and they sue, and they make one of the first two crucial decisions in this case. They say, well, you know, we're not just going to sue about the state law that got rid of the integration plan. We're going to open this case up, and we're going to look at all the segregation that has been going on in Detroit public schools and why it actually happened. And this is where it gets really interesting because they end up having a 41-day trial, and they have a housing case within a school case. So, you know, typically in a school case, you'd be saying, well, what did the school authorities do? What did the Board of Education do? But before they even got to any of that, they started talking about, well, why do we have residential segregation in Michigan? Why do we have it in Detroit? Why do all the black folks live in Central City? What about racially restrictive covenants? What about FHA policies? What about redlining? What about the two separate racial brokers and racial realtors, racially separated realtors association, and how the state endorsed all of that? And so what they do is they try to show that the reason why students live in particular neighborhoods isn't just because they want to live there or what have you, they might, but because they have to because of segregation. And the reason that this matters is because the defendants in several cases like this, including in Detroit, had said, yeah, we don't know why black folks live where they live. You know, we don't know what's going on. And if there's any segregation, and we doubt it, we aren't responsible for it. So if we just decide to have a neighborhood school rule, we didn't do anything wrong. We didn't violate the Constitution. And the lawyers say, I think it's more complicated than that. And so what you end up getting in this trial is essentially the history of Northern Jim Crow and how Northern Jim Crow was prosecuted, created, and maintained. And it's happening every day in downtown Detroit in this Judge Roth's courtroom, and they basically put on this incredibly masterful trial, and they win. And they turn this judge, who I mentioned was really skeptical of their claims, and they sort of the scales fall from his eyes, and he begins to understand why the North looks the way it looks and how similar the North is to the South. In the South, of course, you have all these laws that say, or we had all these laws that said, students have to be educated separately and whites only drinking fountains and all of that. And he thought none of that was happening in the North. But in fact it was. It just appeared in a different regional appearance.
Yep.
We had a nationwide system of Jim Crow. It looked different in different regions.
Tell me more. I got a few questions now. This is getting good to me. Tell me more about Northern Jim Crow, what it looked like then.
Northern Jim Crow is, you want to be able to live in the suburbs? You can't. You want to get money to be able to build your home? Sometimes it's difficult because you're redlined, and what that means is that the federal government doesn't underwrite the mortgages that you would be eligible for if you're a black family, and you want to be able to purchase a home. It means redlining, as we discussed. It means restrictive covenants. It means a whole lot of different things in the North. All the different ways in which all the different governmental actors work together to make it difficult for blacks to be able to have free choice in the housing market. And then that gets bled into the schools because when the school says we're going to have a neighborhood school rule, they basically incorporate all the residential segregation into the schools.
Yep. I want to ask you this question, and I'm thinking about how I want to frame this in a way that makes sense. We started this conversation with my asking you about some of the characters in this story that you bring to us in this book called The Containment, Detroit, the Supreme Court, and the Battle for Racial Justice in the North. I asked you about some of the characters. I want to press now and ask you more about Detroit as a character in this story. And I think the way I want to frame this is to ask you, I think this is the right question. Detroit is the right place or the wrong place as compared to other northern cities for this case?
Well, it's interesting that you put it that way. First of all, I'm from Detroit. I'm a Detroit native, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to write this book. I was so interested in it because I love Detroit.
Yep.
But the thing we have to understand about Detroit is it's a city that I have very special feelings for, but the techniques that were used to basically segregate black folks and black families were happening in Detroit. They were happening across the country. So was Detroit the right place to bring this lawsuit? I think so. The NAACP thought so. They spent almost $1 million in today's dollars to litigate this case. And they thought that if they could win in Detroit, they could basically bring copycat cases across the country.
Yep. So that's what they thought. But ultimately, what did the win mean?
Okay. So this is really interesting. So the trial court judge, the lower federal judge, says, you know what? There's a Brown violation here. His guiding light is Brown. And he says, even though we're not in the South, and even though we don't see whites-only signs, you prove that Brown was violated because you intentionally segregated students into the schools, and that's the state of Michigan as well as the school authorities in Detroit. Mm-hmm. So they win, and in fact, that was never disturbed, right? So there's this finding of liability, but the judge starts saying, hey, you know, what's the appropriate remedy for that? Once there's been a constitutional violation, we got to figure out, well, what do we do for the students? And the Supremes had already said in the South, the remedy for that is desegregation. And so he said that's going to be the remedy here in the North, in Detroit. But the problem was that by the time the ruling gets entered, it's, you know, early 1970s, and the school system in Detroit is already at least 2/3 black. Mm-hmm. So he says, well, let's use the suburbs. Now, what makes him think he can do that? First of all, the state of Michigan has violated the Constitution. In Michigan, education is a statewide function. All of the school districts in the state of Michigan are effectively state agencies. And he heard plenty of evidence in the trial that suggested that blacks wanted to move to the suburbs and they couldn't, and that there was all kinds of segregation going on there. So he says, hey, we're going to have this massive metropolitan remedy that's going to include about 50 separate suburban school districts with the city of Detroit, and it's going to cover about 800,000 students. And that was the idea behind his remedy, and he thought that Brown required it.
I'm thinking about those parents. Let me just back up here for a second. I'm thinking about all these black parents who were so disappointed, who were full of angst about Detroit's separate and unequal school system and what their kids were being subjected to. I could have asked this question earlier, but I want to raise it now. And that is for you to tell me more about these parents and how aggravated they were knowing that their kids were receiving a less than equal education in Detroit, in the North.
That's a great question. Let's talk about our named plaintiff, the person who's first named in the complaint, Verda Bradley. Mm-hmm. So she comes to the NAACP, and she's really upset because her son is going to a separate and unequal school right in the middle of Detroit. And she thinks that the way to be able to get some level of equality is to have integration. Mm-hmm. Why does she think that? Because she thinks green follows white, mm-hmm. right? And so when the school was more white, it was better resourced. And she says, well, now it's less white and it's less well resourced. And so there's a lot of information in the book and in sort of the interviews that she gave around sort of why that was the case. And so I think what really drove her was a vision of integration that was more muscular than we often think about. It's one where sort of a form of forced resource sharing, right? So to ask the question, why do white folks have all those resources to begin with? And that's a question that we can sort of ponder. And so she says, you know what? I really want to work with the NAACP and join with this lawsuit because it's going to be better for my kids, right? And I'm going to get better educational resources for my kids. And there were a lot of black parents who thought that. In fact, we have some survey data from the late 1960s in Detroit saying that Detroit parents were pretty pro-integration at the time. And I think they made the decision that this was the best way to get resources for their kids. That changes. But the point to really notice is in the 60s, we've got sort of this moment where there's black parents who think this is the appropriate remedy.
Mm. I want to connect some more dots here. This audience knows that I had the honor of working for one of the first black mayors in this country of a major city, Tom Bradley, here in L.A., where I sit.
Yes.
There, of course, was Carl Stokes in Cleveland. Later, we get Maynard Jackson in Atlanta. But you know where I'm going. I want to get to Coleman Young. So yeah. I want to situate this story historically because Coleman Young, at the time of the telling of your stories on the cusp of becoming Detroit's first black mayor, connect those dots for me.
Well, of course, when you asked me earlier about the characters, I said, and many more. And, of course, he was one of the ones I meant when I said, and many more.
Sure.
So this is a Coleman Young that I think folks maybe aren't as familiar with. This is Coleman Young as a youngish state legislature. late state legislator before he becomes mayor of the city of Detroit. And he's very pro-community control. And we talked about sort of the different personalities and the different sort of pieces of black political thought. And, of course, you've got some black folks who are more immigration-oriented. You've got some black folks who are more nationalist-oriented. And some of those folks really want to get black control over black schools, the community control movement. And I think that Coleman Young was sort of more on that side, and he wanted there to be better accountability to black parents. And so what he does is he passes a law that basically authorizes the city school board to redraw district lines to create more accountability, to basically get more parents involved in running the schools. But of course, when they get this authorization from Coleman Young, the head of the school board, who's very pro-integration, says, well, you know what, let's throw an integration plan in there too. And that's how the lawsuit got started, right? So you've got Coleman Young in the background sort of doing his thing, and he's a big character in this case, or in this book. And you can see him acting as a really adroit politician and figuring out ways to make compromises and sort of having 2 feet, 1 foot in sort of the more community control camp, and then maybe 1 foot more in the sort of it's important to have integration too.
Speaking of characters, this case we're working our way toward the Supreme Court in this story. But there's a guy named Thurgood Marshall on the Supreme Court at this time. Talking about that character.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking about Thurgood Marshall, and of course, this is somebody that we all know, and someone that we think of in the highest terms. And there's nothing in my book that undercuts that at all. This is Thurgood Marshall. Sort of, you see him. You begin. The book opens with him with President Johnson nominating him to be an associate justice of the Supreme Court, and of course, he'd had all this history prior to that, and so I expect the reader, and I know that the reader knows some of that. And what you end up seeing is him basically as a judge. And he's on the Supreme Court, and he came on there at sort of the tail end of the Warren Court, and then he stayed over to the Burger Court. And we can talk a little bit about Nixon and sort of Nixon's role, and Nixon's a character too. Mm-hmm. But he ends up writing, when we talk about the case, we'll talk about, when it gets to the Supreme Court, we'll talk about the dissent that Thurgood Marshall wrote. And he is best positioned, I think, more than anybody in the country to talk about what the meaning of that is. But you see him as the fulsomeness of his life experiences and all that he's done, that he's bringing to bear to talk about why this case is so important, and the fact that he's on the losing side, not the winning side there.
I asked that question about Justice Marshall in part because as we're driving this story forward, he becomes a key figure, as Professor Adams just said. In case you've tuned in, the book is called The Containment: Detroit, the Supreme Court, and the Battle for Racial Justice in the North. We are essentially having a conversation about how post Brown v. Board, after Brown v. Board, the Supreme Court renders a decision that essentially keeps school segregation alive. Our guest is Michelle Adams, the author of the book. More with her when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
This is getting good. Yeah, man. Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
Are you 50 or older? This news is for you. The CDC now recommends you get vaccinated against pneumococcal pneumonia. Even if you're healthy, your age puts you at risk. People 50 or older are over 6 times more likely to be hospitalized with pneumococcal pneumonia compared to adults 18 to 49. Just one shot can help protect you. Learn more and schedule at vaxassist.com. That's VAXassist.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Progressive presents Renter's MVP's Most Valuable Possessions. Today's MVP, Tom Kelly's carbon fiber mountain bike. Because more than riding his carbon fiber mountain bike, Tom loves telling people about his carbon fiber mountain bike. Friends, family, even a local barista knows about his carbon fiber mountain bike. And that's why Tom's carbon fiber mountain bike, if you haven't heard about it, is today's MVP. Keep your most valuable possessions protected by bundling your renters and auto insurance with Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and other insurers not available in all states.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. High winds of 40 to 70 miles per hour and low humidity could worsen Southern California wildfires, which have destroyed thousands of homes and killed at least 24 people. The National Weather Service warns of a particularly dangerous situation for LA and Ventura counties starting today. Contract talks between Chicago Public Schools and the Teachers Union are at a standoff. The union reduced demands, but CPS made few concessions. Newly elected school board members will be sworn in tomorrow. President Biden will give a farewell address to the nation this Wednesday, just days before he leaves office. Biden will speak from the Oval Office at 8 p.m. Eastern. And due to the Los Angeles wildfires, Beyoncé postponed her Tuesday announcement. The Weeknd canceled his January 25th concert and delayed his album release to January 31st. I'm Bree Wood on the Black Information Network, your home for Black News First.
Count on Lowe's to lend a hand to prepare, recover, and rebuild during the wildfires. Lowe's is part of your neighborhood and want to make sure you have the supplies you need when you need them. Visit Lowe's in store or online to get emergency supplies now and learn about relief efforts in your area.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Very impressive performance by the Rams Monday night in the NFL playoffs. They dominated Minnesota with a 27-9 win in Glendale, Arizona. The Rams defense was lit. A playoff record 9 sacks, an interception, and a strip sack fumble that turned into a 57-yard touchdown for rookie defensive end Jared Verse. The Rams play at Philadelphia Sunday at noon. The Lakers, playing their first game in 6 days, lost at home to San Antonio 126-102. Before the game, the Lakers made an $8 million pledge to relief efforts in the battle against the wildfires in L.A. County. The Clippers beat Miami 109-98. Fans entering the Intuit Dome in Inglewood were given towels with the words L.A. Strong. Keep your radar up on this situation. Colorado football coach Deion Sanders confirmed that he had a conversation Monday with Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones. Jones is looking for a new coach. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like the style, though.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
We asked seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone, and should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month.
If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
If you're living with dry age-related macular degeneration or dry AMD, you may be at risk for developing geographic atrophy or GA. GA can be unpredictable and progress rapidly, leading to irreversible vision loss. Now there's something you can do to
slow it down. Get it going slower.
iZervay is proven to slow GA progression.
iZervay. gets GA going slower.
Izervay or avacin-capted Pagel is a prescription eye injection used to treat GA. Don't take it if you have an infection or active swelling in or around your eye. Izervay can cause eye infection, retinal detachment, or increased risk of wet AMD. Izervay may temporarily increase eye pressure. Your vision may be impaired after an eye injection or exam. Don't delay. Ask your doctor about Izervay today.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Visit Izervay.com. That's IZERVAY.com.
Freedom is an endless meeting, so let's get back to it with Tavis Smiley.
Smokey Robinson joins us today in our third and final hour. Looking forward to that conversation with Smokes. But I'm enjoying this one with Professor Michelle Adams. Speaking of Detroit, her book is called The Containment: Detroit, the Supreme Court and the Battle for Racial Justice in the North. In case you've just tuned in, it's a fascinating conversation. It's making us rethink the history of civil rights in this country. I am anxious to ask Professor Adams how we process politically that it was a Supreme Court decision that kept school segregation alive in this country post Brown v. Board. But I can't ask that question until I let her get me to the Supreme Court and what happens after this win in Detroit. Professor Adams, take it away.
Thank you so much. So we win at the trial court level. We win below. We actually, there's an intermediate federal court between the trial court and the Supreme Court. They uphold the trial court's order that says that we're going to have this massive metropolitan desegregation plan. And then we get to the Supreme Court. And what's important to understand is that the Supreme Court has changed. So, excuse me one second. President Johnson, of course, leaves, and then in 1968, Nixon wins the election, and he gets 4 Supreme Court picks. And so the court changes very much from the Warren Court to the Burger Court, and it becomes a much more conservative court. And we get to the Supreme Court in 1973. We have oral arguments, and the question is really whether this remedy will stand. And the Supreme Court says no. And what's interesting about that is they never say, well, it wasn't because they didn't actually segregate the schools. They never say it's because, well, the attorneys didn't prove their case. They never say it was because, well, there wasn't enough evidence. What they say is that the remedy itself is just too large. And that if, in fact, you want to bring in the suburban school districts, you've got to prove that each and every one of those school districts actually violated the Constitution within the city of Detroit. The problem with that, of course, was that the state of Michigan was found to have violated the Constitution, and Michigan was in control of education throughout the state. And so it really is the Supreme Court that sort of turns back this idea of having major metropolitan desegregation in 1974.
So now I can ask the question that I posed a moment ago, which is how, as we sit here today, looking back on this decision, a case that, again, little known, Milliken v. Bradley, how do we process in real time that it was, in fact, the U.S. Supreme Court post Brown v. Board that did away, that rendered a decision that kept school segregation alive when we were that close to seeing school integration in this country?
Well, I think one of the things you got to think about is the importance of elections, which I don't think I need to tell anybody who's listening to us here. The 1968 election, the 1972 elections are fateful elections, and the president, of course, gets to make their choice around who's going to be on the Supreme Court, and most of the time the Senate goes along with that choice. So once you have an individual in the White House who's interested in having a more conservative Supreme Court, then these kinds of rulings become possible. And the reason why this one is just so difficult is that, and this is really important, in the early 1970s, before this case, it's really not clear what Brown actually means. And that's the important thing to keep hold of, is that, you know, the court really hadn't spoken very much about Brown, and all the cases had been in the South. And the promise of Brown, which included the ability both for black school kids to be able to have access to all the resources that white school kids had, was there, but also to bring us together as a nation. And it wasn't clear that, you know, what the problems would be, or that there would be a problem with extending Brown to the North. And so what you really get is, yeah, you know, you can establish that the Constitution was violated in the North, but the Supremes are going to tell you that basically your remedy is limited to, you know, urban areas, and you can't go into the suburbs. And I think that's really sort of a very difficult thing to take, but it's important for us to really understand how we got here.
This victory in Detroit notwithstanding, that brought America to the brink, as I said earlier, of a fully integrated public school system, the Supreme Court's decision notwithstanding that, you know, that again kept school segregation alive. I'm wondering, given your research and work on this text, whether or not you have come to a decision about whether or not America, never mind these cases, was prepared to accept a fully integrated public school system in the early 70s?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it's a hard one, and I know you know that. One of the things, though, that one of the many tragedies of Milliken versus Bradley is that what you really had was you had the beginnings of some white folks who were interested in trying to reach across city-suburban lines and create the preconditions for there to be meaningful integration. Mm-hmm. And so this is another sort of untold story, is that not a lot of them, but there were definitely a number of folks, particularly white moms, who were interested in trying to sort of come together with black moms to facilitate city-suburban integration. And so, you know, you can ask the question, is America ever ready? And I think that, democracy is a process, and it requires us to think hard about what kind of world we want to live in. And I think that the United States would have been more ready for this, and the country was more ready for this, if the Supreme Court had let this remedy go forward. I mean, we did it in the South, and the South was much more durably integrated than the North. Did white folks in the South want it? No. But then, once time went by, we have a number of experiences that are really positive when we talk about integrated schools. So it's important to understand that you have to have structures that allow people to make better decisions. And when the Supreme Court strikes this remedy down, it basically gets rid of the incentive for folks to shake hands and pull together across city-suburban lines.
At this point in your career, having written this text, I am curious as to how this research and this work that you had to do to bring us the Containment, the new book, how this has impacted your thinking, your view of Jim Crow in the North.
I think that the Northern Jim Crow story is an untold story, and I think that there's a really poor understanding of Northern Jim Crow. Mm-hmm. And the Supreme Court is still somewhat confused about it. When you hear these technical terms, de jure, which means by law, and de facto, which means we don't know how it got that way, the idea that there's de facto, it's like, I don't know, right?
I've used de jure and de facto many times in my career, never heard or considered that particular definition of de facto, but I love it. I'm sorry, go ahead. I love it.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's fine. And so, every year students walk into my classrooms and I think they think that, Southern Jim Crow was what Jim Crow was. And if there's one message to take away from my book, it's that we had a nationwide system of Jim Crow that appeared different in different regions. Yeah. Right? It had a different face in different regions. And so I learned more about that by going through the process of writing this book. I learned more about how it was done. I learned more about the fact that it was a bunch of different kinds of actors, local, state, and federal, who came together to create this situation. But I do think that what my contribution I want to be in this book is to sort of try to establish the factual record and get people to understand what was going on. Because unless and until we understand what Jim Crow really was, and unless and until we understand how segregation actually functioned, it's hard to create a constituency to say it's important to actually have integration, because people think that like nothing bad ever happened in the North, or if it did, it was just sort of like who knows what created it.
Yeah. In the early 70s, in case you've just tuned in, America came really close to a fully integrated public school system until the Supreme Court said no, essentially. And now we have the era of Donald Trump 2.0, where he is threatening to wipe out the Department of Education. I am curious as to how Professor Adams views that promise from Mr. Trump. And I'm more curious about what we can learn today from what happened in the early 70s. We'll do that when we come forward with Professor Michelle Adams. Her book is called The Containment, Detroit, the Supreme Court, and the Battle for Racial Justice in the North. You're listening to her, and I'm glad about it, on Tavis Smiley.
Generous listening.
Charitable listening.
It's why everybody wants to talk to Tavis. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Welcome to Staples.
I am so pumped. My business is going to kill it this year.
Awesome. How can I help?
First, a new computer.
With Staples Home and Office Hot Deals, you save big on tech.
And new posters.
Save on custom printing, too.
And,
a new chair?
A chair? Who has time to sit?
Maybe all your new clients?
Now you're talking.
With Staples Home and Office Hot Deals, you'll find huge savings on custom prints, storage, chairs, and tech. And now save up to $175 off your print order. Exclusions apply. Visit staples.com/print for details. Ends 2/1.
Robinhood Gold members can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on annual retirement contributions. With Robinhood Gold, the perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive a 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to robinhood.com/boost. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC.
So this new dose is, nope, that's not it. The price is nowhere to be found.
Mr. Green? Hi, it's all good. We've got this.
This is not just help from a Walgreens pharmacist.
Oh, new prescriptions. Cool. Let me check to see if these are the lowest cost options covered by your Medicare plan.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
This is someone supporting you every step of the way. Chat with a pharmacist today to find help saving. This is the human kind of help. Walgreens.
This is a story of the one. As a maintenance specialist for university housing, he knows college students can major in wear and tear. Plus, housing so many students doesn't leave a lot of room to house all the supplies he needs. That's where Grainger comes in. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast, dependable delivery, Grainger carries the quality products he needs so he doesn't have to. From a new door hinge to a whole new faucet. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Febreze. As a rideshare driver, I love keeping my car smelling fresh and clean. So when I'm driving, I only trust Febreze car vent clips, featuring 3 distinct intensity settings, because it's that little touch that sets me apart. I can turn the intensity down for subtle freshness, or I can turn it up for when I want lots of scent. So whether it's set to low, medium, or high, with Febreze car, I know my car's going to smell amazing. Which keeps my driver rating right where it belongs. Picking up, Oscar!
Sometimes I struggle to get to sleep. My body stopped for the day, but my mind is still running. So I take ZzzQuil.
ZzzQuil, the world's #1 sleep aid brand, has a range of non-habit-forming products to fit you and your family's needs. Invest in a great night's sleep for the best you tomorrow.
I'm awake and ready to take on anything.
Better days start with ZzzQuil nights. Explore our products at ZzzQuil.com. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
Less monologue,
more dialogue.
Tavis Smiley continues right now.
Does indeed with Michelle Adams, Professor Michelle Adams. Her book is called The Containment, Detroit, the Supreme Court and the Battle for Racial Justice in the North. Not to make you political, Michelle Adams, but Donald Trump has promised to abolish the Department of Education, even as he is at the same time appointed or nominated Linda McMahon. These cabinet hearings, confirmation hearings are underway right now. Earlier in today's program, we played some sound from Tim Kaine, Senator from Virginia, grilling Pete Hegseth, who was trying to become Secretary of the Defense Department. But these confirmation hearings are underway. Linda McMahon's is on tap. Meanwhile, again, Trump is promised to abolish the Department of Education. I'm just curious as to your thoughts about that and how that how you view that in real time vis-a-vis education in this country.
Well, I mean, I have to be brutally honest and say that I'd like to prevent myself from having brain damage. And what that means is that I really do.
You're funny.
You're
funny. Yeah.
I really do. I mean, I think it's important to look at what people do.
Mm-hmm.
Trump has said a million different things, many of them being internally inconsistent all the time. I want to see what actually happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we know with respect to the nominee to run the Department of Education that this is not somebody who's had a long background in education. So we begin with that. But I want to see what the policies are going to be. What do they promulgate? What is there really going to be an effort to abolish the Department of Education? Or is it something that's just being said in the beginning to sort of juice up a base? So I guess the answer is that we'll have to see. And then when we look and see what they do, then it's going to be important to be able to think back to what happened in the 1960s and 1970s to give us some guidance and to give us, a rudder to think about why what they're doing, if in fact they do it, is so problematic. And I do think that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, to be able to, again, try to create a historical record that people might not have been aware of and do it in a way that is open, that allows people to step into the doctrine in a way that doesn't dumb it down, but that is accessible to a lay reader, and then is filled with narrative and characters and folks that you can relate to really understand what happened and what the opportunities were and how those opportunities were taken off the table in 1974 by the United States Supreme Court.
Indeed, there were. Our remaining moments with Professor Michelle Adams when we come forward. My exit question, as I suggested earlier, is what we can learn from all of this today. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Why does Tavis say, when we come forward?
Because he's not going back.
And you don't have to go back either. Forward ever, backward never. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
Cashback is not available on gas in New Jersey. 3 years now, I really enjoy it.
Isn't it hard to make money these days with the price of gas being so high?
Not for me. I use Upside, the free app that gives you cash back for every gallon of gas you buy.
Wait a minute. Are you saying you actually get real money back when you get gas with the Upside app?
Yep, I get real cash back every time I get gas.
Does that actually add up to anything?
I'll make around $200 to $300.
Wow, that's serious extra cash. I'm downloading the Upside app now.
Download the free Upside app now to earn real cash back every time you buy gas. Use promo code MOTOR for an extra 25 cents a gallon bonus on your first tank. You can cash out anytime right to your bank account, PayPal, or a gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Upside app and use promo code MOTOR for a 25 cents a gallon bonus on your first tank. That's code MOTOR.
KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you that we keep us safe. The Live Your Life organization mentors young women, helping them break negative mindsets and see beyond their surroundings. Through career exposure and hands-on training, they're encouraged to think big, stay focused, and make positive choices. Founded by Nikisha Mama Boo Smith, who transformed her life to become a community leader. Live Your Life is changing lives, but they need your help. They're raising funds to keep their new building open and expand their programs. Your donations will support food, clothes, hygiene products, and holiday giveaways. Visit liveyourlife32.com. That's LIVEYOLIFE32.com to help today. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
More honesty than you can handle.
More empowerment than you can imagine.
You're tuned in to Tavis Smiley.
I ran out the door and down the hallway when I saw Smokey walk in. He's in the building. And just gave that brother a big hug. I love me some Smokey Robinson. We'll talk to Smokey for the hour in just a few moments after we wrap this brilliant conversation, or I should say amazing conversation with the brilliant Michelle Adams. Once again, speaking of Detroit, her book is called The Containment, Detroit, the Supreme Court, and the Battle for Racial Justice in the North. I close with this as the exit question. What is it that all these years later we can learn from this case of Milliken v. Bradley in the early 70s, and how close this country actually came to realizing fully integrated public school systems, Professor Adams?
So I would say it like this. I think about it from the perspective of democracy in three ways. Little d democracy, black parents who were demonstrating, protesting, picketing in the 1960s to try to desegregate northern schools. Big D democracy in terms of how important it is to win elections. The election of 68, the election of 72, 68 election was quite close, but when you win elections, you control the Supreme Court. And then finally, the importance of democratic socialization. Right? One of the promises of being able to have multi-racial students together and to have metropolitan integration is that we learn the ability to live together. And what Justice Marshall said in his dissent in Milliken versus Bradley was, if we don't learn together, we aren't going to be able to live together. It's the importance of democratic socialization that comes from having integrated schools. And so those, I think, are the three things, the three Ds, three democratic pieces that I think are so important to take away from this case.
It's an amazing text. And again, as I said at the top of the hour, it challenged my view of civil rights in this country. It's an amazing piece of work called The Containment, Detroit, the Supreme Court, and the Battle for Racial Justice in the North. Its author has been our guest in this hour. Delighted to have her, Professor Michelle Adams. Professor, thank you for the book. Thank you for the conversation. Have a great year.
Thank you.
An honor to have you on this program. When we come forward for the hour, William Smokey Robinson on Tavis Smiley.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 things you should know with BIN News. High winds of 40 to 70 miles per hour and low humidity could worsen Southern California wildfires, which have destroyed thousands of homes and killed at least 24 people. The National Weather Service warns of a particularly dangerous situation for LA and Ventura counties starting today. Contract talks between Chicago Public Schools and the Teachers Union are at a standoff. The union reduced demands, but CPS made few concessions. Newly elected school board members will be sworn in tomorrow.